The CMF Phone 1 is the latest attempt by Nothing's budget brand, CMF, to make a luxury item as aesthetically appealing as possible for as low a price as possible. At first glance, they totally nailed it. It's a device that's easier to stomach buying outside of a carrier contract, while still looking nice, sitting on a table while out with friends. But, as those of you shopping for lower-end smartphones likely know, there's always a catch. Below about $600 these days, a company has to sacrifice some combination of processing power, functionality, or materials to hit their price point. Fortunately, CMF has worked around their compromises in smart ways, while throwing in some experimentation that could only work with something as limited in scope as this budget phone. Unfortunately, depending on how you use your phone, those compromises could still be deal breakers. Before we get into all that though, let's take a step back and look at the phone's design. Up front, we have a 2K 6.67-inch 20x9 120Hz AMOLED display, with a claimed peak brightness of up to 2000 nits. It's a surprisingly nice looking display for the price. While I don't have a standardized brightness test, playing an HDR video on YouTube side by side with my Pixel 8 Pro showed a difference between displays, but nothing to make me doubt the CMF Phone 1 getting bright enough for HDR content under the right circumstances. Around back, we have a colorful, textured plastic backing that feels nicer to the touch than many of the glass-backed phones I have laying around. At opposite corners of the plastic are a single 50-megapixel camera and a small knob that comes off to reveal an accessory port. That port highlights the modularity behind the idea of the CMF Phone 1. Nothing sells a handful of accessories, like a kickstand, wallet, and lanyard, which all attach to the back of the phone using that port. It's a neat concept that could expand usability quite a bit if enough folks decide to tinker around with it. Meanwhile, the entire back of the phone comes off after undoing just a few screws. Whether I feel like changing the colorway or swapping out a damaged case, I can do that within a few minutes. Each new case costs about $35 from Nothing and comes with matching back plastic, accessory knob, SIM card tray, screws, and a tool to open the device. Considering back glass replacement on most phones these days requires specialized tools to open, I dig the accessibility on display here. Though, we're not exactly back to the days of swapping out battery packs throughout the day. While the only thing separating me from a removed battery is a warning note on the inside and some pull tabs, I'd need to reapply adhesive each time I replace the battery to make sure it doesn't flop around in the case when closed. That's not great for random replacements, but still perfectly acceptable for years down the road when the battery starts to lose charge. And honestly, combine all that with the fact that this has expandable microSD storage, and it feels exactly the type of single screen phone I would have loved earlier this year when I replaced my Fold 4. Which might make you wonder, what are those compromises I talked about earlier? Well, the first is that removable plastic back. It comes at the expense of NFC and wireless charging. For some, that could be a deal breaker. For others, like me, both features are more of a nice to have than necessities. I personally feel the interchangeability of the back is well worth sacrificing NFC, but hey, I'm not going to tell you how to feel. After all, you might also not like this phone only having 8 GB of RAM and 128 GB of onboard storage. For me, microSDs make up for that shortcoming, but the small amount of storage would likely be a deal breaker for me on other devices. On top of all those factors, there's also the processor. This phone includes a MediaTek Dimensity 7300, a mid-range processor best compared to mid-range Snapdragon chips from a few years ago. It's far from a powerhouse, and on paper, seems likely to make this phone feel much slower than, say, an old flagship with a Snapdragon chip, despite it running the latest version of Android 14. Then, to add more complexity, there's also the fact that this phone has limited capability within US cellular networks. Here in the US, The phone's only available through Nothing's beta program, where they only describe compatibility with T-Mobile's towers. That also means carriers that rent space with T-Mobile, like Google Fi, work well, but those stuck on AT&T and Verizon might not have a great time. While I can't test for carrier issues, I did want to see if all the other caveats actually impacted usability. So I handed it off to my wife, Emily, who swapped her Galaxy S22 for the CMF Phone 1 for a full week. And, well, I'll let her tell you about her experience.
To set a baseline, my general use cases involve cycling between TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, watching YouTube, and listening to Spotify. If a phone makes any of those experiences worse, I'm not interested. Luckily, I felt almost no difference between my S22 and Phone 1. Scrolling and switching between apps felt just as smooth. App stability stayed rock solid. Battery life lasted over a full day without any difficulty. And in general, it's hard to tell the difference between the two phones during actual usage. The noticeable differences are much more minor and mostly come down to my preferences for Samsung's One UI over Nothing OS, which is close to stock Android. I really like Nothing's default monochrome theming and really enjoy the aesthetics of their built-in apps. However, as someone who's used a Samsung phone for many years, I've taken for granted a lot of the minor polishing and app development Samsung's applied to Android. Things like the calendar, weather app, or even the sensitivity of swipe gestures add up to this unfamiliarity that's been awkward to grapple with. Not to mention, I've also experienced a handful of software bugs in the past week that I haven't seen on my S22 in ages. When switching between Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok with my Bose headphones connected, I'll occasionally have audio from one or two of these apps automatically start playing in the background. It's pretty damn annoying, to be honest. Still, even with a full week of usage, I don't feel an immediate need to switch back to my old phone. For all the small gripes I might have, the full package feels great and does everything I want it to do. Unless those small issues continue to grow, it really comes down to which phone I prefer aesthetically in the moment. If you're someone who also primarily uses your phone for social media and watching videos, you're also probably going to have a good time.
In general, Emily's experiences match the poorly kept secret among smartphones that as long as you're not trying to push your phone to its processing limits, you likely don't need the latest flagship processor. Something mid-range or a few years old will likely serve you well. With that in mind, what about if I actually want to push the processor a bit? What about gaming? It's honestly in that regard that I think this phone gets even more compelling. As some additional context for those who are also deep into the retro handheld scene, the MediaTek processor inside the CMF Phone 1 is only slightly different than the one in the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I'm providing that context because gaming performance is very similar to what's been reported on that device. PS2, Wii, GameCube, and PSP emulation are all surprisingly great on the Phone 1, even while scaling up to 720p or 1080p gameplay. Games like Ratchet & Clank, Mario Kart Wii, and God of War Chains of Olympus all ran full speed without any hiccups that I wouldn't expect on other devices using these emulators. The overall flatness of the display and body combined with a clip-on controller also do wonders to help sell the Phone 1 as a proper handheld. If I'm being picky, the only thing that slightly holds it back compared to a dedicated handheld is the thick black bars created by the 20:9 display on any systems worth emulating on this phone. Still, for $200, I could more than see someone picking up one of these as a cheap Retroid Pocket alternative that comes with the benefit of mobile cloud streaming, a newer OS, and better native Android functionality. All that being said, it is still possible to hit a ceiling with this phone. For native Android performance, lighter games like Dead Cells are going to play fine, but heavier games may not fare as well. In Zenless Zone Zero, I found any settings above the 30 FPS medium preset to cause stuttering. Not a huge surprise, but something to keep in mind. The Phone 1 also doesn't handle more experimental emulators like Vita 3K or WinLater very well. Games that are easier to run in Vita 3K, like Gravity Rush, run perfectly fine. But I've seen more graphical issues and slowed performance in other games than I have with other phones. Meanwhile, I wasn't even able to launch a container in Winlater to see what performance might look like for Windows games. Both these emulators are newer and tend to benefit from more powerful processors and custom drivers only available for Snapdragon chipsets. It's possible compatibility with MediaTek chips might improve in the future, but until then, playing these systems on this phone will stay squarely in the realm of tinkerers. That naturally brings us to the question of whether there's another phone option that removes some of the compromises found with the CMF Phone 1. And, well, honestly there isn't, at least among new phones here in the US. From name brand manufacturers at this price point, someone might be looking at the Motorola G5G, Galaxy A15, or, if you're up for a decent challenge, maybe the Xiaomi Poco M6. While these phones hit the right price point and might come with, say, NFC support, maybe a better camera, they're also going to be a little less premium. Among these budget phones, the CMF Phone 1 actually appears to have a more performant processor. Older MediaTek and lower-end Snapdragon chips seem common at the $200 price tier, as do much lower quality displays. At least on paper, nothing seems to have created a bit of a novelty among budget phones. To get better performance, a better display, and more features, I probably need to start looking at the $300 to $400 range and hope I get lucky. If the compromises made by Nothing to hit their price point are deal breakers, I'm not quite sure the compromises of the other budget phone options would feel much better. At this price point, I'd actually be more likely to point someone toward a flagship that's a few years older if they're looking for additional options. A quick search on eBay shows Galaxy S22s and Pixel 6 Pros selling for around $200. The only downside to them might be some cosmetic wear or slightly degraded battery if they're coming used. Also, compared to the Phone 1, you'd have a glass back that's harder to remove and, well, no microSD expansion. So I guess, in a way, even going a bit more premium might come with its own compromises. Again, it's all about what you prize most in your phone. There are no wrong options, just design choices that you'll have to live with. Even so, I'm confident a ton of people would love using the CMF Phone 1 if they're shopping for phones in this price range. Even for folks with larger budgets, it performs well and could make for a great secondary phone for anyone considering something lower risk that they could take traveling with them. The surprisingly good gaming performance and design also make it a solid contender as a gaming device for folks who don't mind sourcing their own controller. An old flagship phone might still technically serve that role better, but the Phone 1 gets extra points in my book for being brand new, having microSD expansion, and having an easily accessible battery. I really dig it, and can't wait to see how Nothing tops it in the future. Those are my thoughts though. I'd love to know yours. Are you in the market for a budget phone and have additional questions you'd like me to answer? Are you someone who ordered a CMF Phone 1 and has thoughts of your own? Feel free to share them down in the comments. As always, if you found this video helpful or informative, go ahead and click that like button to let me know, and then get subscribed for more smartphone videos in the near future. If you're interested in picking up a CMF Phone 1, I'll have a link down in the video description alongside a link to the page where CMF provided files for folks to print their own phone cases, which is pretty neat. But that's going to be all for this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way until the end, and until next time, catch you later.